Okay. So chapter 28 through 31 is really the end, the culmination of everything that's been going on. Chapter 28 being the longest chapter where the most action happens. So in chapter 27, we learned, screen's frozen, there we go. In chapter 27, we learned that there's this pageant that's gonna go on Halloween, and the kids are gonna participate in it, but Atticus and Alexandra are not going to go. Okay, so again, authors don't just include things randomly. That's foreshadowing, right? That maybe something is going to happen that there should have been adults around for. But it's setting up, some suspense for what will happen. So Jem and Scout walk to the school. And it's very dark. And I'm going to pull up sort of this map of Maycomb just to kind of give you an idea. So they live here, right? There's the Finch house, and then the Radleys is here. And if you remember from one of the earlier chapters, it talks about how the Radleys house backs up to the like the schoolyard, basically, right? So to like, basically where they would have like recess or whatever, right? So like a big field basically between the Radleys and then where the school is. So when they come to walk to school, they're coming down this road and then they're going to cross this huge lawn to get to their school. Okay. So just to kind of help with visualizing, sometimes it gets a little confusing, like what is where. So this isn't the best map ever, but I just pulled it up real quickly. So they're going to come around the Radley house and they're going to cross this huge lawn and then go get to the school. Okay. So it is pitch black out. Remember, this is the 1930s. It's the Great Depression. It's kind of a very small town. So it's not like there's, a ton of lights. They don't have their cell phones to guide their way or anything. Okay. So it's very dark. Their friend Cecil jumps out at them right on page 343 and scares them. And they're just kind of joking around, right? It's Halloween. You know how on Halloween you always kind of feel like, I don't know, things are more ominous than they really are. And so Scout, unfortunately, backstage falls asleep and misses her cue. And she's so embarrassed from missing her cue, and Mrs. Merriweather tells her that she ruins the pageant, that they decide they're going to wait until most people have left so that Scout doesn't have to, face this humiliation. Okay, so again, these are all intentional moves by the author to add suspense, to set up the conditions for what will happen in the rest of the chapter. Okay, so they're walking home. She's still wearing that ham costume. I think we looked at a picture of it last time, right? Where she can just barely see out. Her arms are pinned down to the side. So she's kind of like waddling along, right? And Jem is with her. She doesn't have her shoes on. She's like lost her dress, right? It's a whole mess. And they hear someone following them, right? Every time they stop, the sound stops. Every time they walk, they hear the sound again. So of course they first assume that it's Cecil, who's again messing with them, but all the lights are out, like all the cars are gone. So it's even darker than it was earlier, okay? Then on page 350, they get close to the oak tree. Scout says that she can feel the sand under her feet, so she knows that they're under the oak tree, and the person that's following them does not stop this time. They're running towards them. They try to run away, and things get a little bit chaotic here. Remember that our narrator is Scout, right? She can't see what's going on very well. So we talked at the very beginning about like a reliable narrator versus an unreliable narrator. She's not going to be the most reliable narrator here because she can't see what's happening, okay? And that creates some confusion later in the book. So you just have to kind of think about, that we're being told this story not by an omniscient narrator who is seeing everything that's happening, but by someone who cannot see, is in the dark, and is just kind of trying to figure out what's happening. Okay, so first they both go down, and then they both try to get back up. She feels Jem get like pulled away from her, and she hears a crunch. Okay, she is getting squeezed tightly. She says that like the breath is being squeezed out of her, and then she feels the attacker get jerked back as well. So she assumes that Jem has done that, right? She says on page 351, towards the bottom of the page, suddenly he was jerked backwards and flung on the ground, almost carrying me with him. I thought Jem's up. Okay, so she thinks that Jem has pulled this person off of her. Okay. Then there is now a fourth person there under the tree with them who carries Jem. She sees eventually, when she can kind of find her way, that there's someone carrying Jem, right? Page 352, towards the middle of the page. A man was passing under a streetlight. He was walking with the staccato steps of someone carrying a load too heavy for him. He was going around the corner. He was carrying Jem. Jem's arm was dangling crazily in front of him. Okay. So she finds her way home as well. They call the doctor and the sheriff, okay, because the children have been attacked. Hopefully, from all of the foreshadowing, you can kind of guess who would have attacked them before you even got to that part. But the doctor comes in, and, you know, Scout, again, very childlike, is wondering if he's dead. But it's just a broken elbow. So if you remember back, the very first line of the entire book is, when he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. When it healed and Jem's fears of never being able to play football were assuaged, he was seldom self-conscious about his injury. And then the second paragraph, when enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discussed the events leading to his accident. I maintained that the Ewell started it all, but Jem, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. So this whole story, like we said at the very beginning, this whole book is the story of how he breaks his elbow, right? So here it is, it happened, the elbow is now broken. Okay, and then at the end of the chapter, Heck reveals that who is dead. Anybody remember? Heck's the sheriff. He goes and investigates under the tree. Who's lying dead under the tree? Yeah, Isabel. Yeah, Bob Ewell, right? So hopefully while you were reading, you were already guessing that it was Bob who attacked them, just based on all of the foreshadowing that we've gotten of Bob, like, threatening people involved with the case and everything like that. But if not, it confirms it here for us, that Bob is the person who attacked them, and he is now dead. It says, Bob Ewell's lying on the ground under that tree down yonder with a kitchen knife stuck up under his ribs. He's dead, Mr. Finch. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 28. So that's where the majority of the action happens, and then the rest of this is all kind of like resolving the last little, you know, tying up the last little ends. So chapter 29, then, nobody heard, you know, the kids yelling. They were listening to the radio. Scout retells the story about what happened, okay? We learn on page 360 that the attacker tried to kill her, really. It wasn't just that he was, like, squeezing her or whatever. It says, towards the bottom of the page, Atticus fetched the remains of my costume. Mr. Tate turned it over and bent it around to get an idea of its former shape. This thing probably saved her life, he said. Look. He pointed with a long forefinger. A shiny, clean line stood out on the dull wire. Bob Ewell meant business, Mr. Tate muttered. Okay, so her costume, remember, was like kind of like a paper mache type of costume. And so the shiny, clear line is like where the, like a knife would have like slashed. So that whole chicken wire costume, although it impeded her from seeing, actually protected her as well. Okay. So again, Scout is explaining that she thinks that it was Jem who saved her, right? Who pulled Mr. Ewell off of her. At the bottom of page 361, she says, Jem hollered and I didn't hear him anymore. And the next thing, Mr. Ewell was trying to squeeze me to death, I reckon. Then somebody yanked Mr. Ewell down. Jem must have got up, I guess. That's all I know. Okay. Then on page 362, she says that Somebody was staggering around and panting and coughing fit to die. I thought it was Jem at first, but it didn't sound like him. So I went looking for Jem on the ground. I thought Atticus had come and help us and got wore out. Who was it? Why, there he is, Mr. Tate. He can tell you his name. And so at the end of this chapter, we finally, we see Boo for the very first time ever in the book, right? We've heard about him, but we've never actually seen him. So now we learn that Boo is the person who carries Jem to the house and who was there to help the children, right? And it talks about how he's very like pale and sort of almost, I don't know, colorless looking, right? Okay, so that's chapter 29. We learned that Boo was there. That's the first time that we actually see him. He's been just this person that we've heard about all this time. Okay. All right. So chapter 30 is where sometimes people get a little bit confused. So in chapter 30, Atticus is very concerned. He wants Jem to face the consequences of what he's done. Right? Based on Scout's story, Atticus thinks that Jem is the person who killed Bob Ewell, right? Because Scout says, I was being squeezed, someone pulled him off of me. I think it was Jem, it must have been Jem who pulled him off of me, right? So she assumes that it was Jem who pulled her off, and so then therefore Jem would be the person who killed Bob. That's what Atticus thinks as well. Okay, Atticus wants him to face the consequences of that. He says it's very clearly self-defense, but like he needs to face, you know, court the same way that anyone else would. Like, I don't want him getting special treatment because of who I am or anything like that, right? Again, just showing Atticus as like a very honorable character, a character who like always wants to do the right thing, even though it's difficult, right? We've talked a lot about that, having courage in difficult situations. Okay, so he's trying to do the honorable thing, but Heck, on page 366, says in the middle of the page, Mr. Finch, Mr. Tate said stolidly, Bob Ewell fell on his knife. He killed himself. Okay, and Atticus is like, you don't have to do that for us. That's not what happened. It's fine. Jem can face it. It's okay. All right. Excuse me. So Atticus assumes that Heck is trying to save Jem. Okay. But Heck continues to say, like, no, he did not do it. He did not do it. He fell on his own knife. If you look on page 368, he says, I'm not saying she made it up, she being Scout. He says, I'm saying she was too scared to know exactly what happened. It was mighty dark out there, black as ink. It'd take somebody mighty used to the dark to make a competent witness. Okay. So he's basically saying like that Scout doesn't know what happened, right? She couldn't have known. And furthermore, Jem, like his arm was broken, right? He's just been like thrown to the ground, his elbow's broken. Logically, how would Jem pull a full-grown man off of his sister with only one arm as he's injured, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. But Atticus continues to think that Heck's trying to save him, which is not the case. All right. We get this talk about this switchblade that Heck Tate has, okay? And Heck Tate says that he took it off a drunk man, okay? Which by the end of the chapter, we see that that's not true, okay? So on page 368, again, he says that Heck finally says, I'm not thinking of Jem. He says, Mr. Finch, I hate to fight you when you're like this. You've been under a strange night no man should ever have to go through. When you ain't in the bed, or why you ain't in the bed from it, I don't know, but I do know that for once you haven't been able to put two and two together, and we've got to settle this tonight because tomorrow it'll be too late. Bob Ewell's got a kitchen knife in his craw that's basically in his side, okay? He says, your boy didn't stab him, okay? So if there were 4 people under the tree, Scout, Jem, Bob Ewell, and Boo, and Scout is in a ham costume and Jem's on the ground with a broken elbow and Bob Ewell's dead, that really only leaves one person that could have killed Bob, right? And that is who? Boo, okay? So Boo is the person who killed Bob, right? Which makes sense. Bob had a switchblade with him that he was going to try to hurt the kids with. Boo hears them, grabs a kitchen knife, comes out, stabs Bob with the kitchen knife. Heck grabs the switchblade to take it away from the scene of the crime, right? So that there's no like questions. That basically makes it seem more likely that Bob fell on his own knife. If there's two knives there, then you have to like, okay, well, why are there two knives, right? So that's why Heck grabs the switchblade and says that it was taken off of a drunk man. Okay, so you're like, why would he do this, right? And on page 369, we get this explanation. It's kind of in the middle of the page. Heck says, I'm not a very good man, sir, but I am the sheriff of Macomb County. Lived in this town all my life, and I'm going on 43 years old. Know everything that's happened here since before I was born. There's a black boy dead for no reason, and the man responsible for it's dead. Let the dead bury the dead this time, Mr. Finch. Let the dead bury the dead. Mr. Tate went to the swing and picked up his hat. It was lying beside Atticus. Mr. Tate pushed back his hair and put his hat on. I never heard tell that it's against the law for a citizen to do his utmost to prevent a crime from being committed, which is exactly what he did. But maybe you'll say it's my duty to tell the town all about it and not hush it up. Know what had happened then? All the ladies in Macomb, including my wife, would be knocking on his door bringing angel food cakes. To my way of thinking, Mr. Finch, taking the one man who's done you in this town a great service and dragging him with his shy ways into the limelight, to me, that's a sin. It's a sin, and I'm not about to have it on my head. If it was any other man, it'd be different, but not this man, Mr. Finch. Okay. So basically, what he's saying is like, I'm making up this lie, right? Basically, he's like, Tom Robinson died for no reason, and the person who caused that is now dead, right? Because Bob is, you know, kind of indirectly responsible for Tom's death. And he says, you know, Boo was trying to protect your children, was like preventing, right, your children from being killed. And we've already seen how the town reacts to people's kindness, right? Atticus defended Tom, and they had all this food at their house, all these people stopping by. Why would you do that to someone who clearly doesn't want to be out in public, right? Doesn't want the attention on him. Boo lives in his house, doesn't leave because of his reasons that he doesn't, you know, want to come out, like we saw in a couple chapters ago. So he's like, I'm not going to do that to him, right? And he says again, it's a sin. It's a sin, and I'm not about to have it on my head. So again, we're going back to that idea of like, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, right? All they do is create beautiful music. All they do is help people. So he's saying like that it would be a sin to harm Boo in this way, because essentially Boo is a mockingbird in a way as well, right? All he's doing is helping the children by saving them, and although it wouldn't kill him exactly, throwing him out in the limelight, making him uncomfortable like that. It's the same idea, okay? And Scout says that at the bottom of the page too. It would be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it? Okay, and then chapter 31, Scout walks Boo home and looks at the neighborhood from his porch, literally putting herself in his shoes, right? Atticus at the beginning of the book talked about how you don't understand someone until you walk around in their shoes, and that's basically what she's doing. She's viewing the neighborhood from his perspective and understanding how even though he chooses to stay inside, he is still kind of part of their community. And then at the very end, Scout is talking about this book, The Gray Ghost. Okay, and this is again just kind of bringing us back to the theme of the book again. So she's talking about sort of the plot, and the plot mirrors a lot of what happens in our book. So page 376, the last page of the book, she says, yeah, and they all thought it was the stoner's boy messing up their clubhouse and throwing ink all over it. And he guided me to the bed and sat me down. He lifted my legs and put me under the cover. And they chased him and never could catch him because they didn't know what he looked like. And Atticus, when they finally saw him, why he hadn't done any of those things. Atticus, he was real nice. And then Atticus says, most people are Scout when you finally see them. So again, this kind of goes back to that idea of like being intolerant of differences versus accepting people's differences, right? So this story revolves around, I don't know, some person who everyone has these like bad rumors about, just very similar to Boo Radley. But then once you actually see him, then he's actually a nice, good person. Okay. And that is the end. Okay. So any questions on 28 through 31? Okay. So, I mean, major themes that we're looking at, like I said, people being intolerant of differences of others, courage in difficult situations is definitely a big one, right? You see that several times, like with Atticus, Gem and Scout. I mean, you see it all throughout the book. You know, the effects of racial and social inequality, definitely in there as well. And then just the idea of the Bildungsroman, right? The idea of like the growing up, right? The why can't I think of the word? Coming of age. There it is, a coming of age story. So we've got all of those things in there. Okay. All righty. So